Okay, quick disclaimer. I was sick when I recorded this, and I still am. Also, my Kazuha is now rank 18 global since my last video. I got a new mouse, and I'm in the process of building a new and very improved PC, so videos should be uploaded faster. If anyone is interested, I'll drop my specs in the comments section, and enjoy the video. Jesus Christ. And it is time for the Arlecchino Guide. Arlecchino, the Father. One of the best pyro DPS characters in the game, with an amazing damage output and a more complicated yet very rewarding playstyle. In this video, I'll go over her best teams, her best artifact options, what talents are more or less important, her best weapons covering 5-star weapons to 3-star weapons, her energy recharge requirements, best/most important/most noteworthy constellations, her passive abilities in and out of combat, and how exactly to play her. Starting off here at character level. You can get away with keeping her at 80 out of 90. Leveling her to 90 will increase her damage, but not by some incredible margin. Talents. Her main source of damage is her normal attacks. After that, her burst scales really high, with an impressive 666.7% at level 10. Her skill does some damage, but no need to invest in it so high. I'd recommend leveling her talents to 969 and 999 if you have C2. Passives. Her base passive makes her unable to be healed while in combat, only able to heal from her burst. This same passive also gives her 40% pyro damage bonus while in combat. Her Ascension 2 passive is a defensive passive that scales off her attack. She gains 1% elemental and physical res for every 100 attack she has past 1000. The cap for this talent caps off at 2k attack, I think. Her Ascension 4 passive makes her gain more Bond of Life when she defeats an enemy marked with her sigil directive. This passive is also responsible for her sigil's preferred Phase 2 Blood Debt Due. Weapons. Arlecchino has a couple weapons that she can use, however her weapon choices aren't nearly as versatile as Clarenne's. 5 stars. Her purely as a stat stick 5-star options would include the following: Calamity Queller and Vortex Vanquisher. Calamity Queller's passive can only be partially activated, and Vortex Vanquisher's passive can only be activated if she's protected by a shield. Her slightly better options would be Lumidos Elegy, Staff of Homa, and Staff of Scarlet Sands. Use an EM Sands if you use Staff of Scarlet Sands, and only play Vape or Melt teams. Jade Winged Spear would be her next best 5-star option, right after her own spear. Unlike the rest, she can fully activate Jade Spear's passive, and both the base attack and crit rate stat of Jade Spear is identical to her own best-in-slot signature weapon. Following that up, her best option is undoubtedly her own spear, Crimson Moon Semblance. 4 stars. None of her free-to-play 4-star spears are especially amazing, unlike her 2 best 5-star options and 3-star option. That being said, her best 4-star when used for Vape or Melt is the Battle Pass spear, Ballad of the Fjords. The other Battle Pass spear, Deathmatch, is a decent option for her too, but not as good for Vape or Melt, but better than Ballad for Overload teams. After that, there's the Black Cliff Polearm from the store, a solid choice. Her next best would probably be Royal Spear, although I'll never recommend getting a royal weapon from the store. After that, there's Dragon's Bane for Vape teams, and Missive Wind Spear for Vape, Melt, and Overload teams. She doesn't have much to work with when it comes to free-to-play 4-star options. That being said, 3 stars. White Tassel. Genuinely one of her best options for her. This spear can only be obtained through collecting chest drops, specifically from exploring Liyue areas, including the Chasm and Chenyu Vale. At R5, this spear is better than some of her 4-star options. The passive at R5 increases normal attack damage by 48%, an irrefutably crazy buff for her, as she is a normal attacker. At level 90, this weapon also gives more crit rate than her own spear, but keep in mind the base attack is much, much lower. It also looks great on her. Artifacts. Arlecchino has 2 options, 4-piece Fragment and 4-piece Gladiator. It's worth mentioning that the damage difference between 4-piece Fragment and 4-piece Gladiator is only around 10%, so keep that in mind if you already have a great 4-piece Gladiator set for her. Any beneficial EM/attack/pyro 2-piece plus 2-piece is good, but not as good as those 2 4-pieces for her. The end goal should be a 4-piece of any of those 2 sets earlier. Build requirements. Try to aim for at least 75% crit rate and 150% crit damage, not including weapon stats, with at least 1800 attack, and a good amount of EM if you're using her in a Melt or Vape team. As for energy recharge requirements, I wouldn't worry too much about her energy since her damage is entirely from her normal attacks. Her stat priority would be crit rate, crit damage, attack, then elemental mastery. For her sands, I recommend attack percent. For her goblet, you can run either pyro damage or attack percent. She can get away with using an attack percent goblet because she has a lot of damage percent multipliers and pyro damage boosts in and around her kit design, like her spear, her passives, and other teammate abilities. For her circlet, use either crit rate or crit damage. Remember, you want at least 75% crit rate on her. Constellations. C1. Damage increase and interruption resistance. C2. Changes playstyle from using her skill before the rotation to be able to use it after. Also triggers a mini nuke after a charge attack that scales off of her attack percent, along with some comfy defensive effects, increasing all her elemental and physical res. C3. Normal attack damage increase. C4. Energy recharge buff and burst cooldown decrease. C5. Burst damage increase. C6. Burst gains a buff based off of 700% of Arlecchino's current Bond of Life percentage. For 20 seconds after using her skill, Arlecchino gains a 10% crit rate and 70% crit damage buff with a 15-second cooldown. Team comps. Number 1. Vaporize. My favorite Arlecchino team would be Kazuha, Yelan, Bennett, and Arlecchino. However, she just needs Hydro, a sustain for the other team members, and then a flex slot. You could also double up on either Pyro or Hydro, like Mona Xingqiu Bennett. It's worth mentioning that Furina does not work with Arlecchino because of her anti-healing passive. Sucrose can also take the flex slot while using 4-piece Viri and give the Thrilling Tales buff to Arlecchino before she takes over the field. Her favorite supports for Vaporize would be Yelan or Xingqiu, because their Hydro application can keep up with her on-field Pyro application. She also likes an Anemo support like Sucrose, Kazuha, Sayu, or Lanyan. Even Lynette would work because her ult is a taunt, distracting the enemies while Arlecchino takes them out. Her 4th slot is a flex slot. Bennett, Lanyan, Zhongli, Shilonen, etc., they all work there. A free-to-play friendly team would look like this. Number 2. Melt. With the introduction of Citlali, she is a great support for Pyro characters like Arlecchino. When Citlali is on the team, enemy Pyro and Hydro res is decreased, further buffing Arlecchino's melt damage. For a melt team with her, you can use Citlali, plus an Anemo, and then a flex. You can also use a Hydro character in this team, again, not Furina, to freeze the enemies so Arlecchino can melt them. A team like that would look like Citlali, Yelan, Bennett, or an F2P team would look like Rosaria, Xingqiu Bennett. Even without Citlali, you could still use her with a Hydro and Cryo character, or double up with Cryo. An F2P team would look like this. Number 3. Overload. Just like Clorind, this team is only viable with Chevreuse. This team consists of only Pyro and Electro. This team would consist of Arlecchino plus Chevreuse, and either double Electro or Electro and Pyro. Your main options for the last two would be Fischl, Bennett, Beidou, Toma, Moika, Ororon, Kujosara, or Xiangling. Remember, this team is only viable with Chevreuse. If you don't have Chevreuse, don't try Overload. Number 4. Mono Pyro. Probably her least popular type of team, since this team is usually only used when facing an enemy in the Abyss like the Hydro Cube, which has a constant EM-related reactable elemental aura. This team's elements would only consist of Pyro, Geo, and Anemo. A Mono Pyro Arlecchino team would look relatively like this: Arlecchino, Shilonen, Kazuha, and Bennett. This team is pretty straightforward, and each teammate is very replaceable. You can throw Xiangling, Moika, Zhongli, even Kachina would work in that team. A free-to-play team would look like this. How to play Arlecchino. This is currently at C0. Firstly, before you do anything, you want to use her skill on the enemies before the rotation. This will mark them with a sigil that looks like an X, called a directive. Phase 1 of the sigil is when the sigil looks skinnier, versus the second phase, when the sigil is emphasized, named Blood Debt Due. You want to let the sigil reach phase 2 before you activate her Bond of Life, because she gains a further damage bonus if the sigil reaches phase 2. During phase 1 of the sigil, this is when you want to do your rotation. After your rotation, your sigil should be at phase 2 by then. Once you reach level 2, this is when you charge attack. After charge attacking, you gain your Bond of Life. Bond of Life is when she gets her Pyro Infusion, and you keep normal attacking until you're low or you run out of Bond of Life. Then you use her skill again before starting the next rotation. C1. Because of her interruption resistance, using a shielder like Zhongli/Lanyan/Diona doesn't become as necessary. C2. After getting C2, You don't have to worry about using Arlecchino's skill before the rotation. She also gains a mini nuke after charge attacking, but it comes with a cooldown. This means you don't want to skill, then charge attack, then burst, then skill and charge attack right after. It's better to pace yourself with using this skill and charge attack, so you take advantage of the mini nuke. You can also just do the C6 tech. C6. Skill and charge attack before you on-field, then rotation, then once on-field again, burst, then skill and charge attack again. You could also skill, charge attack, burst, then skill, then rotation, then charge attack too. Either one is fine as long as you are spacing out the charge attacks to fully take advantage of the mini nuke. And as always, a guide on her teams and a showcase on how to use it. Oh, what the fuck just happened? What the fuck was that? Did you see that?
I wasn't looking, no.
I'll clip it. And thank you for watching. If you couldn't tell already, yes, I got sick, but the next guide will be the Farina guide. It should be posted the day right before her banner, or on the first day of her banner. So stay tuned, like and sub for more, and yeah, keep it snazzy.